Shortly, you'll be enjoying the superb food and hospitality that the Savoy offers. But in the tradition of the WIG diversity, we have a superb speaker for you this evening. This lady has some 20 years working for and consulting to big tech companies. She is a much sought-after leadership coach and work-life fulfillment expert. She offers her advice and coaching to major companies all over the world. Please welcome on stage your speaker for this evening, Poole.
Well, my husband and I, we were putting our 4-year-old son, then 4-year-old son, to bed the way that we always did. There was a bath, there was a book, and then there was this journal for kids. There was a bunch of emotions that would be on the page, and you'd circle the emotion and talk about your day. And so I kicked it off, and I said, okay, Elliot, did you feel happy today? Yes. Okay. Did you feel sad? No. Did you feel worried? Yes. I circled and I said, oh, honey, what had you so worried today? And he said, I don't want to be a grown-up. My husband and I, we exchanged a glance and a smile, and I said, well, the good news is that we probably don't have to worry about that just yet because you're only 4 years old. But out of curiosity, what is it that has you so worried about being a grown-up? And this 4-year-old, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, the work. I laughed, and also it was a punch in the gut because there was so much truth to that statement. You see, one of the main grown-ups in his life, me, the work was hard at that point. It felt really hard. I had spent the better part of 2 decades climbing the ranks of big tech and consulting firms, and I had finally made it. I was a global director at one of the largest and most powerful technology companies in the world. I had the global team, I had the high visibility projects, the promotions, all of it, and I was a bit miserable. You see, I was spending inordinate amounts of time, I found myself spending doing things that I didn't really enjoy, and even more time being concerned that I didn't even deserve to be there, a little thought pattern that had stuck with me my whole career. And that thought pattern, that made me work harder and longer at these things that I didn't enjoy so that I could prove that that I could be there, right? It was exhausting. I felt stuck, and it was soul-sucking. And what was I going to say to Elliot? I took a deep breath, and without really knowing what I was going to say, I heard the words come out of my mouth, yes. Sometimes the work of being a grown-up can feel really hard. But do you want to know the coolest thing about being a grown-up? And he said, yeah. And I said, the coolest thing is that you get to choose. You get to choose the work that you will do. You get to choose how you will do it. And you get to choose, most importantly, who you will be as you go about it. It went right over his head, of course. But for me, this was a turning point. This was a profound aha moment. And it would lead me to make choices that would change the trajectory of my entire career into my life, and in some ways lead me to be just standing here with you tonight. So if there's anything I leave you with tonight in the brief time that we have together, it's that you get to choose. You are the chooser of the very next step, and that choice, that will either leave you here where you are, which may be perfect for now, or it will propel you forward towards the life and the work that you truly want to be experiencing. Sometimes, though, those choices seem really effing hard. Like, I don't see any choices, or there's too many, and I don't know which direction to go in. And in those moments, I think it's really helpful to understand that there will be a series of scenarios that were predictable scenarios that will play out again and again in life and work. And I like to call these all phases of what I call the opportunity cycle. And when we know where we are in this opportunity cycle, we can more easily make choices that will push us through that onto the next phase of the cycle and on closer to our dreams and our goals. So I didn't know it at that moment, but that stuckness that I was feeling, I was in a phase of the cycle all of its own. That stuckness comes from when you're being pulled in two different directions. One direction telling you, change, it's needed, it's wanted, and the other direction telling you it's scary, and actually it's inconceivable, it's impossible. Through working with countless leaders and from my own experience, what I've learned is when we're feeling that stuckness, and I'd venture to guess we've all been there before, the best thing to take away from that is that it's most often simply a signal that we're outgrowing our story, outgrowing our current story. And that idea, that concept, it's not just normal, it's just not okay. It's essential. We are moving into an era where it's going to be normal to be living into triple digits. That's 50 to 60-year careers. That is a long time to be in the same story. I heard a few gasps at that stat. It's true. That's a long time to be in the same story. My advice when you feel this in the face of change, when you start to feel that scared feeling, it's going to sound counterintuitive because it's not the advice that you normally hear, which is feel it and do it anyway. Just feel it. Lean into it. When you feel the fear, allow it, accept it. Allow it to exist without judging it, without even trying to fix it, just for a minute. Research shows that when we do this, when we allow our fears to exist without judgment, a funny thing happens. They start to lose their power. And when that happens, we're ready to move into the next phase. We're ready to start, we're recognizing change is coming, but what? What do I want? What is it going to look like? That next opportunity, that next chapter. And what's really, really helpful to remember in this phase, because, sometimes it's very, very quick and easy, this phase. The right opportunity drops in your lap. So that headhunter calls, or the right partner shows up on Tinder. I don't know, whatever it is, it falls in your lap. But oftentimes it's not like that. And you're looking and you can't quite envision what's going to be next. In those scenarios, the old adage that knowledge is power really comes into play. But I'd ask you to go beyond the idea of knowledge being research. Yes, do your research, have conversations with other people, but understand that the most powerful knowledge that you have is inside of you. And I say this because there is no Google search and no conversation with someone else that can tell you what it is that you want to be truly, truly experiencing in your life and in your work. So the challenge here is a little bit less time Googling when you're in seek phase, a little bit more time getting clear on your core values and on your priorities. The other thing is I'm really conscious that this phrase, knowledge is power, we could what does uncertainty mean then? Our linear thinking brains can go to, well, uncertainty must be weakness, uncertainty should be avoided. But I'm going to ask you to hold a different thought. And that is that uncertainty is possibility. As you're gathering the knowledge, also coinciding with that, listening to the voice that says to you, uncertainty, when we let go a little bit of that craving for certainty that all humans have, we can tap into possibility and creativity that we didn't know existed. And when we start to bring all of this together, things start to get clearer. That North Star, that goal that you want, it starts to sort of come into focus. And you're ready to pursue, right? Ready to go after it. I bet there's no one in this room. I bet this is a room full of people who know to go after what they want. One question in all the work that I do, one question that I see get missed out as we go into this phase is, how do I want to experience the pursuit of this goal? It's so important, potentially even more important than the goal itself. And because when we don't ask ourselves that question, by default, we normally choose something that looks like this. A struggle, laden with fears and expectations, and looking over at the lane next to us to see what other people are doing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, actually. I've done it plenty of times. It's worked just fine. What I'm inviting you to consider is that there is another way if you choose it. A different way that could feel a lot better and smoother. And I know, that's easy to say. It sounds pretty simplistic. And for instance, when I first started my own business, if you had told me that you can choose a different experience, I would have said, yeah, well, the stakes seem really high. There doesn't seem to be a lot of room for error. And yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, so of course I'm looking around seeing what everyone else is doing. But the truth is we can choose how we want to experience it. And it was around that time when I was starting my business that I realized I came across this tool that would help me, would really actually profoundly change and shift how I thought about my goals and how I thought about how I pursued them. I'm going to share it with you right now. So what I'm going to ask everyone in the room to do is, I'm going to preface this by saying you do not have to share what you're thinking with anyone. But dig down deep into your gut, into your heart, into your head, and think of the biggest, hairiest, most audacious goal you have for yourself right now. This might be personal, it might be professional. I'll tell you what it is. It's the one that, when you think about it, it makes you just a tiny bit sick to your stomach. That one. Mentally, you just put it in this box for me right now. Now, as you're thinking about that goal, next, I want you to think about what's it going to feel like when you achieve it? When you tick that box, when you cross that milestone, what's that going to feel like? And then lastly, in this box, how much time are you going to give yourself for this deadline? Or what's the deadline for this? 2 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, whatever it is. Now, what if I told you that this is not your goal? This is your true goal. This is what drives you. This is who you are. This is simply the strategy that you've chosen to get you to your true goal. And this over here, this time, this is how much you're willing to delay your true goal while you implement your strategy. The difference between choosing the ability to choose an experience that feels like a creative, fun journey, experiment, adventure, versus a hard, arduous slog is the ability to focus right here. A lot of people think that a certain set of circumstances need to exist in order to achieve a certain feeling. The truth, you get to choose. And the more you choose to focus your awareness and your energy here, the easier, the quicker the pursuit to your goal goes. And then before you know it, you've achieved your goal. We're moving into that fourth phase, and you are living the dream, friends. So this is not my dog, but it looks so much like her. And I have to tell you, She perpetually lives in this phase of the opportunity cycle. I guess it's different for dogs. The word here to remember in this phase is presence. Because without exception, this phase is the most fleeting. Usually it is not like days or weeks after we achieve something that we start thinking about the next thing. It's usually moments. We achieve that milestone and we're thinking about what's the next chapter, how do I take it that next step? Oh, I don't know if I can do that. Feeling a little stuck now. And here we are, back where we started at the beginning of the conversation. The cycle, it is not, it's inevitable. The question is, how do we move through the phases with greater ease and joy and purpose and speed towards our goals? And as a leadership coach, I have a lot of these kinds of tools that I share and work with my clients through. And actually, I'm going to be sharing some of my favorites with you can take away to use after tonight. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And that is that there is a consistent theme. There is something that is almost always missing when we're having trouble moving through this cycle. And I have to tell you, it is the most underrated and misunderstood leadership quality out there. It's trust. Trust is your leadership superpower. And I say that it's misunderstood because I am not talking about delegation, and I am not talking about micromanaging less. Those are some manifestations of trust, I suppose. But what I'm inviting you to consider is that there is a very real and powerful opportunity hidden in every aspect of how you operate as a leader to trust more and to leverage that trust for greater effect. These opportunities are hidden in plain sight, and I'm going to give you just a couple of hints where to look for them. This is what I call the hierarchy of trust, and at the foundation, we've got self. This is particularly important for women, and even more so for women in male-dominated industries. This is where I pause for a little public service announcement on external validation. So I want to acknowledge that every single one of us, to one degree or another, to the ladies in the room, that we have all been taught to create a worldview that says, I need permission to show up fully as myself. I need permission to go after that next opportunity. And so it makes perfect sense that we seek external validation quite a bit. This is a dangerous and slippery slope, though, for two reasons. First, external validation, the high, it might feel good for a second, but it is extremely fleeting, and it's diminishing. It's almost as if the more you get, the less meaningful it becomes. And that explains why, we get a pat on the back, and I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but you find yourself back on the treadmill, looking for that next stamp of approval. It's exhausting, it's draining, and I'm here to tell you there are better ways for us to use our energy. Secondly, and I wish someone had told this to me early on in my career, so the more senior you get, the less pats on the back they hand out. So just as you've been taught to feed off of it, they start to take it away. It's not very helpful. And that's why it's so important that we prioritize the unlearning of the need for that external validation and prioritize investing in building that inner self-trust. And as you develop self-trust, then what's another funny thing happens is it actually becomes easier to trust others. Whether that be trusting your team to grow and stretch into their roles, or trusting your colleagues to have your back, or trusting your partner at home to hold up their end of the bargain. Trusting others is amazing because it empowers them, but it also gives you space to grow. And then we find ourselves at the apex of the trust hierarchy, trust in the process. This is the most commonly overlooked, and it is everything. This is knowing that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. It's knowing that, failing is learning, and learning is winning. And that, we can have preferences on how we want things to unfold, but we don't have to hold on to those desired outcomes with white knuckles. We can loosen our grip a little bit and create space for maybe even better things to happen, maybe even miracles. Trust is your leadership superpower. And your ability to trust is the ability to tap into the trust you have for yourself, for others, and the process. That is the mark of a transformational leader. So I'll leave you with a question that you can use whatever phase of the cycle you're in, whatever phase of your career or your life you're in. And that is this: where could I choose to trust more? When we lean into trust, we find ourselves moving through that cycle. Trust is not only the sign of a transformational leader, no matter if you're leading an entire company, a team, a project, you're CEO of your own life or career. And what's more, it's simply the most effective and efficient way I know how to move through those cycles and one step closer to the life and the work you truly want and deserve. Thank you very much.